What's up everybody, I'm John, this is Midnight Paint and Body. In this video we're going to go over the basics of automotive primers. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to Midnight Paint and Body. What you see before you, this empire, is my business, my body shop. Incidentally, was recently voted the #1 body shop in British Columbia by 3 of my best friends. Yeah, obviously I made that up. I'm way too miserable to have 3 friends. Anyway guys, check out the video for the 70 Charger. You've seen, if you follow the channel, you've been seeing that car getting built for quite a while. It is finally painted. I'm going to show you what we're working on here today. So the Chevy truck, I just put a wheel arch in this side. I think we're just going to focus on this side because the light's better. I'm going to take you through some automotive primers, what we use and why. Now obviously, primers have 2 purposes in automotive repair. First off, we need a primer on the bare metal. So we need something that is going to adhere to the bare metal. Now, high build primer typically does not. Paint definitely does not. So you've got 2 basic options for coating your exposed metal. So you've got either an etching primer or an acid etch primer or an epoxy primer. I typically always use epoxy primer. It's just more suitable for the kind of work I do. Kind of my own thought process on it is etching primer is fine for small spots, but anything bigger you should be using epoxy. Now, acid etch primer, just like it sounds, it gives the corrosion resistance and the adhesion because it does have acid in it. I don't know what kind, I'm not a chemist, but that's how it works. That's how it adheres to the metal. Now, epoxy primer, it has zinc phosphate, and that is how it adheres to the metal. They both do kind of the same thing. Typically, like an etching primer, you should sand it before you put your high build primer on top. An epoxy primer with the zinc phosphate is a non-sanding primer. So you can lay that on and 15-20 minutes, whatever they recommend, you can put your high build primer right on top. You can also, in the case of like a lot of the work that I do, like restoration work, if you've got a complete car in bare metal that's going to be open metal for a long time, you can epoxy prime the whole car and you can do body filler right on top of that epoxy. Now again, check the recommendations. I think a lot of them are like 8-12 hours, I don't know, that you can just recoat them. After that you should scuff it so it's got some adhesion. Now there's a lot of misconceptions about primer. When you get into something like this where we're painting, this doesn't need primer. So where your substrate is in good shape, you're going for a mechanical adhesion. That's why we sand. That's giving that mechanical adhesion for your paint or your primer, whatever you're putting on there. But we need that chemical adhesion to the bare metal. So after we've treated that bare metal, we're going to go to a urethane high build primer. Now, the reason we use a high build primer is to level these surfaces. So you can see, say where I've sanded through the paint here, obviously this level is changed through here. Especially so when we're doing body work, where you see I've got a little bit of body filler here where I've worked a dent out. So you've got our primer for the metal and then our high build primer, but just putting that primer on there isn't leveling the surface because now that primer is uniform to whatever surface is there. That's where we're going to do block sanding. So you've got a flat block of some sort. So when you're sanding with that, you're bringing all of that surface down uniform. So you'd be taking more off here and less off here, or whatever it is, until that surface is flat. Okay, makes sense? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to back this thing into the paint booth, my very orange paint booth. I'm going to mask it up, and then I'll bring you guys in when we do some primer. And actually, incidentally, I've got a little bit of a dent here. Now, this needs a little bit of filler, so just a little bit of putty, but I'm purposely leaving that just to kind of show you guys how the high build works. So I'm going to leave that, we're going to block that. And, you know, if you're new to this, this might be helpful. If you know this stuff, I mean, you know this stuff. You might know this stuff better than I do. That's a very good possibility. But anyway, guys, I'm going to get some paper and plastic around this thing, and we're going to get some primer on it shortly here. Okay, so we're all masked up. We're just going to give all the bare metal one good uniform coat of epoxy primer. Three coats of the high build primer over the bodywork areas on that, and what you just saw me do there, guys, what I just showed you with the spray can, old painter trick. I haven't done that in years, but I just figured for the sake of the video, I'll kind of show you it's a good trick if you're just learning prepping. And when we get back out here tomorrow morning, it's the end of the day now, I'll show you why we did it. Well, good morning, everyone. It's the next day. If you're still here, same truck. So we got some primer on it yesterday. Now, after I finished spraying the primer, you saw me kind of dust this just with an old spray bomb of black spray paint. So you're probably familiar with this trick, but what this is going to do, as we block sand this repair, this is going to show us any low spots. Now, if you remember, I know there was a little dent right in here somewhere, and I purposely left that without putting any filler in it. And there's not much of a dent. I can do it after, if it even needs it. But I'm going to kind of show you guys what I'm talking about. So, whatever sanding block you have, I mean, you can go to your Princess Auto or Harbor Freight or whatever, buy the super cheap ones. If you're just learning, that's completely fine. You can even make one. These are, you know, reasonably good quality block. I've got a whole bunch of variety of these. So our little dent was in there somewhere. So we'll just start kind of blocking that primer off until we see where it was. You see, by changing kind of directions of which way you're sanding, if you keep going the same way, you're not taking as much off. You know, if I'm going this way, I've created that scratch going this way, and then I go that way. That's just taking a lot more material off. But now you can see So now obviously you would see that without the guide coat, but the guide coat just helps for me to show it to you guys on the camera. So you can see where that dent is. So that has been left low. Now if that was a lesser low spot, I mean, I could just keep blocking, nice flat block, until it goes away. But I know that is going to be a little too deep to block out in the primer. So what I will do with that, I'll sand that spot in there because that's not sanded. Give that just a really skim coat of some finishing putty. And then we'll just hit that with a little aerosol primer. So I'll show you guys that in a bit. I'm just going to block a little more, and we'll come back to that spot. So, okay, the compressor's running, but I'm just going to show you guys here. So, you know, I left that just so you could really see it, but turns out that when I did this dent here, I did leave a bit of a low spot. Now I can just barely feel it. If I keep blocking, this will probably come out in the primer because I've still got a ways to go. But now what I like to do on these, before you take the primer all the way down, I like to do the putty now. You may end up taking that putty right off and it may still come out in the primer, but it seems to do a better job of blocking things flat to do the putty before your primer is taken down as far as it can go, and then work it all down together. I can't really explain that why, other than I just find it better to do that than to go burning through. Maybe that's kind of what I'm trying to say. It's better to do it now than to burn through all the primer and then do your putty. If you do it now, we're not going to burn through all around it. We're just going to have a small little area that might just need a little spot prime. So I'm going to mix up a little putty and I'll kind of show you guys, and I'll show you here also. Just find a piece of sandpaper. So now obviously that low spot isn't sanded, so our finishing putty is not going to stick in there. So we want that sanded, we want that little bit of a tooth in there for it. All right, I'm going to go mix up a little bit of putty and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've mixed up a tiny bit of glazing putty. Now, this is what this stuff is for. Guys overuse the hell out of this stuff. This is not for doing body work. This is for finishing. Now, actually though, the one thing I learned from the first guy that ever screwed me over horrendously in this trade was when you're doing your filler, fill big. Now you see we've got a little bit of a low spot. We don't want to be just trying to, you know, fill that low spot that's there. You want to fill out around it so that you're blocking everything down flat. If you're trying to fill small little spots like that, you're going to be chasing it and adding filler and chasing and adding filler, and it yeah, it just doesn't work out. It's just more work. So it might seem like more work to have to block more, but just fill big. A little farther on that one. Okay, so while the putty was setting up, I just started kind of prepping on the rest of the panel there. Now, the rest of that stuff I can just do with a sander. Now, same idea as with a block. I mean, if you've got a half-decent finishing sander, just super flat, obviously. As soon as you put that thing up on edge, you're digging trenches in the paint that you're going to see when you paint it. But it's, well, maybe let's start on this upper one here. Hopefully you guys can kind of see that. So I've switched to some 180 grit on my block. I was using 220 on the primer, but for this putty we're going to use some 180 to knock it down. So just switch back to some 220 to finish it off. Alright, so I kept on blocking a little bit, so I finished this back to 320 grit. So let me just kind of show you guys what I was talking about here. Remember I said I figured this would mostly come out in the primer? So you can see just a tiny bit of putty is left in those low spots, if you remember where I sanded kind of like that, where that low was. And I'm just starting to hit the epoxy primer. So I haven't burnt right through yet, so that's perfect. And then this one here, you know, like I said from the start, I knew this dent was here, but I left it on purpose. So that is also finished to 320 grit. It's good, you can't feel it. So from that point, I'll just take a little bit of aerosol primer. So this just as you can see, just a 3-in-1, just kind of a multi-purpose. And this isn't going to take much, you know, it's I'm going to dust a little of that on there. The same there, because that stuff will bleed through. If you try painting over those putty spots, they're going to ring and they're going to bleed through in your paint as that paint kind of soaks into it. But now when I finish sanding this, which I'll finish the whole panel with 320, and then I will just hand sand the panel with 400 grit, and from there it's ready to paint. So I'm just going to finish this up. I think next time you guys see it, we'll put it in the paint booth. Get this thing painted today, I believe. I've still got a bunch of prepping to do on the other side. But yeah, I'll bring you guys along as we make some progress. So here's our bedside ready to paint. So I figured I'd bring you guys for one more look here. So as you can see, so I finished it off basically with the sander with 320, and then I hand sanded the entire panel with 400. That is going to be good enough for paint for what we're doing. Now, kind of again talking about primer. So obviously up here, like I said before, I mean, we don't need to prime this existing paint. As long as your substrate is in good shape, you can paint over that. We have mechanical adhesion. That's why we sand. We've got that sanding scratch, that tooth in the paint that the new paint is going to bite into. Now, where we've primed, so where we've burnt through the paint, now, so this had a tonneau cover that kind of dug a little groove all the way along. So I've sanded that out, I feathered it out with the sander, I've coated it with primer, and then I have sanded the primer flat to kind of make that surface as level as we can get it again, and to seal that up. If we were to paint over, actually there's a little bit of a burn through there. I'll probably dust that with a little aerosol primer actually. That's the kind of thing that could show up in your paint job because it'll kind of soak in differently. And again, a little bit of a different level because we've sanded through. So I'll dust that with a little primer, but that kind of shows you where, so that's what we've done with the rest of this, with our repairs and where I've sanded through, sanding out marks and chips. We've re-leveled all the surface with the primer. Or I should say with block sanding the primer is how we're leveling it. So we're bringing everything back down to a flat parallel surface. Maybe that's the wrong word, I don't know. But anyway, this side's ready to paint. I'm gonna prep up the other side. I'll bring you guys back when this thing is shiny and painted and done, and we'll see how everything looks. Hey guys, next morning, truck's all painted. Better bring you in for a quick look. So here's the area we're working on. So as you can see, or as you can't see where the repairs were done, where any of those low spots were. So that just kind of shows you what primer and block sanding does. So I'm just going to do a little cleanup, a little bit of assembly on this truck, get it out of the booth, and we'll have one more look at it. Okay guys, so there's another job all ready to go back to the customer. So hopefully, you know, if you're kind of unfamiliar with different primers and their purposes, this will help a little bit. Something I meant to mention in the video too, that when you're using an epoxy primer or an etching primer, those primers are designed to stop good, clean metal from rusting. Primer doesn't stop rust from rusting. So, just thought I'd mention that, because, you know, we've all seen that truck driving around that, you know, is rusting out over the wheel arches and somebody's taken and, you know, spray bombed some primer over top. Which, all that does is make it look worse. It doesn't stop it, it doesn't slow it, it doesn't do a darn thing. And just for an example, now I put a wheel arch in the other side of this truck. So this side here, I cut out this whole arch and welded an arch in, but that's not what I was doing the video on this one. But so, this truck was just starting to show now, so you can kind of see the bubbling here. You can obviously see where it was through here. Now, whatever you put on here does nothing. You can put, you know, your rust or primer, whatever crap you want on there. It's not going to do a darn thing, because that's where the rust is. You know, it typically is always coming from the inside. You know, surface rust isn't really a thing, other than, you know, if there rocks have beat behind the wheels and you've got some actual surface rust. But typically when you see that kind of rust, it's always through. So, I mean, on that note, even if your truck is starting to rust a little bit like that, if you can get up in behind and treat this with something, that's going to make it last longer. Whatever you put on the outside does nothing. So, as you can see though, our repair is nice, so it kind of shows you what the epoxy primer does as far as the corrosion resistance and adhesion promotion on the metal. And then our high build primer, of course, is for leveling the surface. And you can see that's a nice repair. You can't see that it was done. And that kind of shows you too that, I mean, in the body shops, your prep guy, your paint guy is kind of a goaltender. If you've got, you know, if you got a body guy sending over mediocre body work, and the prep guy doesn't do his part to straighten that out, then that's going to be a bad job. So, you know, a good prep guy, a good paint guy is worth his weight in gold in the, you know, in this industry for sure. So, hope you found that helpful, guys. If you liked the video, you can, you know, do the subscribe thing if you want. If you don't want to, I don't care. It's all good. But, as always, thanks for watching. I hope you come back and check out the next one.